Welcome to another episode of the Heritage Building Podcast. I'm Vincent Reed, your host. And today we have the privilege of speaking with Maggie Henderson. Now, Maggie's a colleague of mine and an expert in historic buildings archaeology, and also a director of the Historic Buildings Archaeology and Conservation. With over 25 years' experience in studying and conserving historic structures, Maggie has honed her expertise in timber frame buildings and fabric-based analysis, and has guided countless conservation efforts with her comprehensive evaluations. Her dedication has taken her from Scotland to the southeast of England, where she has been safeguarding the past through meticulous research, reports, and management plans. Her work ensures that historic structures retain their unique character for future generations. So, Maggie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks very much. It's good to be here.
Oh, good. So, as I always start with my guests, I'm just really interested to find out how you started. So your background and how you progressed into doing what you do now.
Well, I'm a lifelong archaeologist. I first started being interested in archaeology when I was about 4 years old, and I read a book on, obviously a child's book, on Skara Brae, and I was absolutely mesmerised by the monument, by the masonry structures, and that was it. I was like, I'm going to be an archaeologist, and then from the rest of my life, that's what I sort of strove to do, which sort of ended up in a degree at Edinburgh University in archaeology. And then after that, I went into the commercial sector. And for some reason, even at university and in my early career, I was always involved in surveying historic buildings. So that goes from multiple black houses on the Isle of Lewis at Garranan, through farmsteads and townhouses in Edinburgh, all sorts of other buildings. I did dig holes as well. I am an actual archaeologist. So for 10 years, my career was quite mixed in sort of excavating and recording historic buildings. And then just through consistency, I became more and more specialised with historic buildings. And I surveyed them with total stations, I did hand drawing records of them, all that sort of stuff. And I kept up with technology for quite a long time. In fact, when I first moved to the south, I moved to London, and I did digital recording of historic buildings for some companies in London. And from there on, just sort of increased my specialisation and became much more involved in analysis and interpretation. And that's what sort of landed me in the southeast, working for Archaeology Southeast, which was a really good thing. I stayed there for 6 years, and while I was there, I got to work with David and Barbara Martin, and it's like standing on the shoulders of giants when you work with people like that, with such a great knowledge of the buildings and the vernacular buildings in the southeast. It enriches your own abilities, it enriches your own sort of knowledge, and makes you much more committed to understanding these buildings and sort of helping to sort of safeguard and manage changes to them for the future. Because the point isn't to keep everything preserved in aspic, is what clients always say to me. It's not that at all. The point is to retain a legible narrative and to safeguard what is important for future generations. So that's kind of what's happened to me over time.
What inspired you to go from field archaeology, like you said, you were digging holes, but actually to then progress into the buildings archaeology? Was there one particular project that you had that you thought, I actually prefer this more than I do the field archaeology side?
Not really, not at all. I did a lot of excavation. I still love excavation, and I still do a little bit of it for my company to keep my hand in, because in fact my company sort of strives to unite subsurface archaeology with standing buildings archaeology, because they work together.
Yeah,
and
it's
better if you sort of have a more holistic approach. But when I was in early career, I was doing a lot of excavation. I was also doing a lot of building recording, and because I was really quite good technically, I was good at sort of drawing and measuring and illustrating, and I was good with the technology at the time. So I was using sort of the total stations, and we had a sort of reflectorless total station, so you could digitally record buildings. I mean, that's basically the sort of precursor to full scans of buildings. So, you know, it's just because I had a sort of ability to do it, when the projects came up in the companies I was working with, it's just they got me on that. So it just got more and more and more. And the
I
field
see.
archaeology got less and less and less. So I didn't choose a specialism, it sort of just chose me, basically. It's just sort of the pattern of my work. And then over time, just kept building on it and building on it. And now, obviously, I'm completely addicted to it. But
So if you hadn't been so good at the technical drawings and that aspect, you may not have gone into it.
yeah,
Possibly.
I guess if I hadn't gone into buildings, I would probably have studied the Mesolithic Neolithic transition. So, you know, much earlier archaeology than the stuff I'm looking at now, which is mostly sort of, you know, 14th, 15th, 16th century onwards. You know, I think the early stuff I'm looking at the moment is from the 1200s.
Yeah, it looks like quite a hard career. With the field archaeology. I love the program Digging for Britain. I'm obsessed with that. And when I had the flu for the last couple of weeks, I watched all the episodes of Digging for Britain. And it always looks so glamorous because they always cut to the bits where people are finding these amazing artifacts. But is it pretty hard? And you know, in all weathers, and you know, you're damp and it's raining, and what's it like? What's it like to do that?
You have to be pretty obsessed. I've always been obsessed with archaeology, so you have to be really committed to it. I remember working in the Inner Hebrides. I was working in the Isle of Lewis, and it rained. We went up there for a month. It rained for most of the month. It really did. And the water comes down, and you're digging a hole, and you're in peat, and the water's coming up. So the water's coming down and coming up. And every time you go out and get back into the hole you're digging, you have to take a bucket and a sponge, and you get all the water out and you throw it back out. And you know you're fighting a losing battle because the water's coming up and the water's coming down. But it's just clearly I am a sucker for punishment because I stuck that out and I kept going back to the Hebrides as well for years. I went as often as I could. These started off as the university digs. We had to do a certain amount of field work for our degree, and at Edinburgh University at the time, I was really lucky. It was a really high sort of amount of work you had to do. You had to do 18 weeks. I think other universities at the time, you had to do like 6 weeks or less, 4 weeks. So I was by the time I left university, I'd done a year's worth of field work as well as my degree because I went on everything I could possibly go on. And quite a lot of that was in the Hebrides where it rained and the water, you know, you got sandwiched between water all the time. And it's funny, when I look back at that, all I can remember is like the 3 days of sunshine. For me, it was just this beautiful landscape that was just lit up. But it wasn't, the conditions were not like that at all for working in. So it takes a certain type of person, I think.
Yeah. And you must have got so cold as well.
Yeah, but you know, I am Scottish and
Yeah.
I could take more cold than most people, but you know, I've been in the southeast for since 2000, so that's what, 25 years. And I'm much softer now.
Yeah, you're a soft southerner now.
Soft.
Do you remember the moment when you first came across your the first really interesting artifact that you thought, oh my goodness, this is incredible? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do, and it's really boring for most people, but it's really exciting for me. I was working on a Roman excavation in Musselburgh, just outside Edinburgh, and we were digging a Roman road, which is really hard going. Incidentally, it's extremely difficult to dig it. It's all mattocks and it's all very jarring and it's extremely painful. While we were doing this, we found wheel ruts. So you know, you could see that there was carts passing up and down, you know, carriages or whatever on this road, which was amazing. And I found it was a lathe turns, I can't remember, it was boss, something like that. So it was antler and it had been turned on some sort of lathe like that. Yeah, and it was like, you know, a couple of thousand years old. So that was fantastic. And it was the most northerly example. So that was all fantastic. But the thing that was most exciting to me were the wheel ruts. because the wheel ruts were the passage of time. It wasn't just an artifact, it was something moving along a road.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have seen a lot of fantastic things, and I've seen some incredible buildings, some amazing archaeology, but that is probably one of the most remarkable things I've ever experienced. Most people are just like, what about the gold?
Yeah.
I've never
And
found.
what was the material that the wheel ruts were set in?
Oh, it was masonry. There was sort of Roman roads are sort of like, they're sort of sandwiches of sort of masonry and gravel and masonry, and they've got drains and things in them. And it just feels like excavating concrete, to be honest.
Ah,
Yeah. I've just remembered another really good thing, and it's recent. And this is archaeology as well, but it ties in a bit better with what I do now. We've been working at a property called Priory House in Dunstable, and we're working on a building called Priory House. It has a medieval undercroft, so the ground floor of it is vaulted, quadripartite vaults, and that dates from the 1200s, right? But everything above that and around it, even the external walls, have been rebuilt in the sort of Georgian period. But we've had the sort of pleasure of excavating the top of these vaults. So when you go into the first floor room and lift up the floorboards, we've got the top of these vaults and all the material that they had put in the 1200s to create a sort of, to backfill the vaults and the voids and to create a sort of floor surface. And we've been excavating these because they're having to do essential repairs. And we've been working with Sarah Tattersall at the Morton Partnership, who's an absolutely remarkable engineer, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with her. We've been doing this for about 3-4 years now. Anyway, when we were excavating this with my colleague Dick and Hart, who was doing all the hard work, we discovered sort of layers in this vault infill, and this is original material, and it kind of looks like a cake. So you've got this sort of white, sort of loose, chalky rubble material. Then we had these dark bands. Then you'd have another white chalky band. Then you'd have a thin dark band. And it turns out these thin dark bands were organic matting, the sort of material we had an environmental archaeologist, Lucy Allott, look at it. And it had heather and various other sort of organic material in it. It was very dry. And we got Historic England to do some carbon-14 dating of it. And they came back with a date that was, if I get this right, something like 1217 to 69. So we have scientifically dated the construction of these vaults through tiny bits of material as well. These are not big chunks of wood that we send off. This is a bag of pretty much debris, and they have managed to scientifically date it with 95% confidence to 1217 to 69, which is like, we're not stylistically dating this building anymore. We thought it was the early 13th century, but we are now scientifically certain with the 95% confidence rating that this is a 13th century vault.
So that's incredible.
Well, that's buildings archaeology, and it's subsurface archaeology, only it happens to be at first floor level within a building. So it kind of brings it all together, and it has been absolutely fascinating. And I can't find another example of it. We've got ideas of why the organic material's in there. But I've been trying to find sort of parallels, and there aren't any. There might be some abroad. The problem here is people haven't realised in the past that the material that's sitting on top of these vaults is part of its construction. So quite often it gets dug out and it's gone, So,
and do you know why it was there? Is it sort of thermal properties?
We think it's something to do with sort of consolidation and a sort of light sort of mat that's good for sort of cohesion and consolidation of the layers above, and it's sort of spreading the load. That's where we are at the moment with it, but there's going to be a lot of discussion on that before we finalise. And the work at the building is still ongoing. So I think the completion date now is probably early to mid 2026. So it's a really long running project, but by the end of it, we'll know more and we'll publish.
Wow. God, that's fantastic. I look forward to reading about that.
You definitely must look at the actual proper date.
So, was it work that brought you down from Scotland? What was your hometown in Scotland?
Was born and grew up in Glasgow, and I went to Edinburgh to study, stayed in Edinburgh for 10 years, and then I headed south. And it was always my plan to keep going south and then get off the island and go abroad and have massive adventures on the continent. But I got stuck at the southern edge of Britain. I didn't get stuck. I happened upon, fantastic people, fantastic buildings, and incredible mentors in David and Barbara Martin. So,
was it quite difficult though to leave Scotland?
no, I think as an archaeologist, because you're so used to traveling about and working, it's just a bit further. It's just more you go further. I could go pretty much anywhere and live anywhere. I don't really feel particularly tied.
Okay. So you hadn't really planned to be based in the southeast.
No.
You didn't know where you were going. Particularly, you may have gone overseas or anywhere. You were literally just following the archaeology, really.
Pretty much. Yeah. I went to London first, and I worked in London, and did a lot of surveying, and by surveying I mean the sort of like digital survey with the total stations.
Yeah.
I did a lot of illustration. It wasn't satisfying because I wasn't really in the field doing the archaeology, and I wasn't looking at the buildings so much. So that didn't last particularly long. And I moved into a company in Oxford and worked in Oxfordshire for 3 years. And that's when I got back into the fieldwork, the historic buildings and the archaeology. And that's where I really started to unite the two, which is like a mission of mine. I think archaeologists, when they're out excavating, should really look up and look around them and look at what's going on with standing structures and I mean even walls, boundaries, everything. And I think that buildings archaeologists should really think about the subsurface archaeology and try and understand the sort of situation that creates the whole. We have to have more of a sort of holistic approach to this.
Yeah. And what qualifications did you have then when you left university?
I have a MA in archaeology.
Okay. And that was enough to get you any type of job in that field?
Not specifically. I mean, you can get a job in archaeology if you have a lot of experience in archaeology. It's the field work that did it. When I left university, I left in a particularly difficult time to get any work. This is like, I hate to say it because it tells you how old I am. This is in 1996, and it's just like there wasn't any work about it, not at all. But I got work, and I always got work, and I got headhunted, and that's because I left university with that year's worth of field work, where everybody else in my year had their 18 weeks. And it's consistently been the experience. You can't. Qualifications are great. They're great. And I love research and I love studying, and I'm constantly saying I'm going to go and do a PhD, I'm going to do it. But the thing is, nothing makes up for experience, and that's where you get out and you see things and you keep, you widen your knowledge. So the next time you're in a building, you're like, I have seen this before, or the experience and the knowledge of other people working in the same field and in related fields, and being able to contact them and ask them, like I do with you guys, or like I do with you all the time. Found a staircase. I've got some paneling. Here's some carving. I do that here, and like various other people as well. It's that sort of collaboration, that sort of collaborative approach with other people that are skilled in their own fields and have experience in their own fields.
Yeah,
and building up that experience yourself. That's what gets the work. It's not the qualifications.
Are there far fewer? I would imagine there are far fewer building archaeologists than there are field archaeologists.
There are definitely far fewer. Yeah, I think there are more now than when I started out, definitely. And there's some really fantastic courses. So I've just gone on a bit, don't do the academic route, but there's some incredible things. There's the Blue and Downland and their MSc, and York have always done good stuff for buildings archaeologists. I think Portsmouth does some good stuff. That like conservation, more of a sort of conservation and archaeology thing. Because obviously you see it, it all works, you know, whatever route you go. I'm just saying basically that you don't have to go an academic route to achieve this. You just need to be committed to it and, you know, probably quite obsessed with it, and then
Yeah.
build up that experience and build up the connections. And it's not a sort of a networking thing, it's a sort of acknowledging other people in other areas. And I mean geographically as well as other subject areas, and being able to call on them and contact them and ask. Everybody wants to help. Anybody that emails me and asks me something, I want to help them. You know, when I ask you something, you want to help me. This is what we do as specialists or experts, whatever you want to call us. So I think it's acknowledging you can't do it all on your own, and there are so many related disciplines out there that've got something to offer. And it's sort of bringing all that, listening to folk and bringing that all in, and then getting a really good story at the end of it. That's the important stuff.
Absolutely. So you managed to find work because of your field experience, and then could you be quite fussy with what you were taking on, or did you have certain jobs that you really actually disliked, but you just had to sort of stick with it because you were worried that there was other things that weren't going to come around the corner?
I've got some jobs that I don't want to do, but you have to do. Yeah, when you're working for a company, you just have to do the next job that they give you. So there's that, and I've done loads of that, but you can, or I have always found that there's always a way in, there's a road in to making it interesting, and it doesn't matter what it is. You know, I am not a specialist in a whole load of different building types and areas. And for example, I've recorded air raid shelters and searchlight batteries and various other things, and I am not a sort of World War anything specialist, but these are fascinating structures. And when you get involved in them and you start thinking about, like, the surveying technique, the assessment technique's the same no matter what you're looking at, but when you actually start thinking, what am I looking at here, and then, you know, sort of broadening that out in your research, getting in touch with people that know stuff about this, and just getting sort of really sort of diving deeply into it, you'll bring something out of that that's of like fundamental importance or interest to you, you know, and you build on that, even if you don't want to do it in the first place. Like, I can honestly say, hand on heart, I didn't want to survey a raid shelter, but I'm really glad I did. I'm going about why, but I'm not going to do that now. But, you know, I'm really glad I did.
And also, you have to do some of the boring, mundane stuff, even that wasn't boring and mundane, but you still got to do those projects, because when you do get something exciting, you just appreciate it more.
Yeah, and it's work, you know. If you have to take, well, I don't have to take everything that comes in, and I don't, because I can't, for a start, and there are other people that I will recommend that are a better place to do some jobs. But, you know, you can't choose everything, and you get paid for it. It is your job. If it was absolutely fantastic, you wouldn't get paid for anything. You know, this is how you earn your living. So some jobs, they're not my research interests, they're not my specific areas of interest, but they're valuable nonetheless, and it's worth putting every bit as much effort into that, achieving that, as it is into achieving the survey of a lovely transitional timber framed building. You know, it's got all the good stuff in it.
Yeah. Could you define exactly what it is being a buildings archaeologist, and with that crossover? Because it seems to me like there is a complete crossover from field archaeology to building surveying, architecture, whatever it may be. But I'm sure many people that are going to listen to this podcast have never heard of a historic buildings archaeologist. So just to explain, Maggie, if you could.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. A lot of my clients don't know what to call me. They consistently call me a historian. I am not a historian. You know, I have researchers that do the historic research background, because it's a very specific field, and I don't pretend to be anything other than I am, and I will always acknowledge the other specialists. But I don't know, the sort of thing that I do is structure based. So it starts with being in the building and looking at the building and looking at the structure and working out, you know, how it started as first built, basically, and then all the changes that have occurred to it since then. And this is all, you know, we we illustrate copiously. So there's a lot of phased floor plans, elevation section drawings, photographic record, and honestly, digital photography, because I started it when there was no digital photography. So absolute godsend. So sort of, yeah, structure-based analysis, and then presenting that in a way that other people can understand. And the point of all of this is to understand the resource so that you know what you have. And then that feeds into understanding its significance. And then from there, you can assess the impacts of what people want to do, which is about managing change and retaining that sort of valuable and legible narrative of the building's evolution for future generations. So I don't know if that answers your question. The subsurface.
Yeah, no, it does. But when you first went into the first few buildings you went into and try and understand how they were originally constructed, it just must have been impossible. Because even I go into a building now and I think, God, I wish I knew a bit more about this subject, because it's changed so many times over the years. It's evolved so many different adaptations that you're walking to a building, where do you start? Where on earth? I suppose maybe it's the date of the building, the type of timber framing that they were doing at that time. Is that where you start, or how do you go about that?
I think this is probably from my archaeological background. So you start by recording it. So, and you're thinking about, this is like almost stratigraphic. You think about how they're put together in the first place. And looking at it, drawing it. I think David Martin would definitely say, if you're drawing it, you're looking at it. You're really looking at it. You know, the joints, the setting out marks, carpenter's marks, the nails, you know, everything, absolutely everything. But it sort of all goes hand in hand. There's no sort of one element that sort of explains how this is done. You know, if I would go into a building starting from scratch, I'll give myself a bit of time to do a bit of a recce, and I'll go around the whole structure with my torch, having a look at everything and sort of absorbing the layout and the construction details and things like that. And then after I've had a bit of a look, then you start doing the plans. If you've got plans, if there's survey drawings available, you need to check them. You really do, because like what architects are preparing are different from what we're preparing, you know, so you have to, they're not showing the same details because they're trying to do a different job, obviously. Then you start marking up things on these plans. And this is a really difficult question, and it's hard to explain. It's easier to show people, to be honest, about, you know, to get them out on site. I had to do this recently for National Trust. I had to do a sort of training day in a 16th century barn with a whole load of volunteers, and which was great because you take a lot of things for granted. You know, I'm standing in there seeing something, and they're not seeing that at all because they're not coming at it from the same place. But you can still learn a huge amount from other people. They'll come in not looking at it the way you do, but they'll start picking out things that maybe you've not noticed, which all sort of into the understanding of the building. But I don't know how to describe how you do it. You have to be systematic, and I truly think the sort of subsurface archaeological background has something to do with this. You have to think about how the building's put together and how to record it. And once you've done that, once you almost sort of take it apart and put it back together on the page, then you're in a better place to sort of understand what you've got in the first place.
Yeah, there's one caveat to that though, and if you're going to do a archaeological dig in the field, it's unlikely that somebody would have replaced old artifacts in that area, for instance. What I mean by this is that when you go into an old building, a lot of the time they used to use reclaimed beams and floor joists. If a house is being knocked down the road, they would use that. Even if that building was going to be a brand new build, they'd say, oh, let's go and get some beams and let's go and get some joists. So they used an awful lot of material. So that must be far more difficult because, you know, if you're looking at something that is 200 years old and then something that's 300 years old, it's quite difficult to tell the difference sometimes. How do you go about that?
There's two things I want to say here. When you're excavating on site, you will find older things and more modern things. And sometimes it's because you can get, it's called residuality. So sometimes you might be digging a medieval ditch and you'll find Neolithic pottery in it, and it's come in through, because sometimes it can come into animals.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So yeah, you do get the same thing in subsurface archaeology. But yes, when you're in a building and you're looking at an awful lot of secondhand material, it can be a wee bit overwhelming. In fact, yeah, the thing is you start to build up the pattern. So when you're in the building and you're looking at how its floor plan, its construction details, it's the sort of overall sense of it and style of it and whatever, and then you start to see a lot of reused timber, but it doesn't correspond with anything. So you're looking at it in one side of the building and you're looking at all the holes and joints in it, and you think, right, you know, for instance, that's got to be a wall plate. So you'd be looking to see where the other part of it is, and it's not there. Something else is there instead. And the thing that's there jointed into various other stuff, but your wall plate's spliced in, you know, your reused wall plate spliced in, and it's the overall pattern. You're like, it is reused. You know, we're looking at a building that's late 16th century, for example. Most of the other stuff all corresponds really well together, and then there's these things that don't quite, and they've got redundant jointing in that relates to something else entirely. So I don't know if that helps or confuses, but it certainly helps to have looked at an awful lot of buildings. You know, this is definitely something that comes with experience. So people that don't have a similar background, or, you know, that don't have that much experience looking at a lot of different historic buildings, it can be a bit more overwhelming. It can, if you've been doing it for a very long time and you've seen a lot of different structures, it's not quite as difficult to decipher as it could be.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the things that are more difficult for me are when you're in a building that has extremely good quality work that's a replica rather than reused timber. So if you're looking at something that's done in the late 19th or early 20th century and it's done really, really well, and you're standing in there looking at the original timber frame and you're looking at something that's just like the original timber frame, and you're just like, I don't know if this is the sort of arts and crafts era or you know, SMAB era or whatever. I don't know, or if this is the original stuff. And you start ending up, you're measuring the size of peg holes. It's just like, okay, no, the original stuff, they're 2.5 centimeters in diameter. And this other stuff, they're only 1.5 centimeters in diameter. You know, you sort of look into something, or, you know, the sort of edges are sharper, or they don't have the same sort of patina of age. And you have to bring in a huge amount of sort of background information and sort of filter the evidence through that and then see what ends up.
And that's where our industries cross over, isn't it? Because I would look at those two pieces of wood, one from the turn of the century and one from the 1650, and I would, a lot of the time, I just get a sense, or you get a feeling. It's a weird thing, but you just get this feeling, and you can't really put your finger on it. This is why this is that date and that's that date. But it's just, I think it's many, many, many years of looking at these objects.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But there must be.
No, go on.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, you get the same thing in field archaeology when you're excavating something, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. So you start to sort of tap it and you almost start to smell it. And, you know, because all your senses and all your experience is telling you something, and you've got to trust your gut.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is a bit like that. But there must be times when you've come back from a project and you're convinced, when you've left the building, you're thinking, right, that's exactly what's happened, and da, 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 da. And then you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go, no, I know what it is now. I'm wrong. It's because that's happened.
Yeah, because you need to let it sort of brew, you like filter. I think
the
main difference with buildings archaeology and subsurface archaeology is, with subsurface archaeology, people are out on site for days or weeks or even months or whatever. And in buildings archaeology, I've got a day. I'm in that building for 1 day or 2 days, and I have to sort of work out how it's all put together then. So, you know, you have to come away with an idea of what you've got and a good record of what you got. And there are times when you sort of wake up in the middle of the night and think, or for me, quite like that process of sort of sleeping on it and waking up in the morning thinking, I wish I'd looked in that cupboard or something.
Yeah.
And then an email to the owner, can you take a picture of that cupboard for me? Yeah.
Yeah. So what about fabric-based analysis? Tell me a bit about that.
Oh, everything, all the sort of details, the sort of like soaking all these details up like a sponge and then sort of filtering them through. You're looking at recently I've been looking at a lot of buildings that have got sort of painted decoration on them, and this is something I've never really dealt with before, and I'm wondering and absolutely certain actually that I have missed some evidence in the past because it's extremely subtle if you're not looking for it. But sort of recently I've been working on projects with Dr. Andrea Kirkham, who's an absolutely remarkable woman and an expert in sort of painted decoration. And through working with her, and also Philip Aitken is a wallpaper specialist, this adds a whole other sort of dimension to buildings archaeology. I'm looking at nail holes. I'm looking at patterns of nail holes on walls, on plaster walls, where it's evidence for textile hanging.
Ah.
So yeah, so fabric-based in the first instance is the structure and how the sort of bare bones of the building has been put together. You're also looking at stylistic evidence, so you're looking at the mouldings and you're looking at the hinges in the door, the style of the door, if the door has been extended to fit the opening, I don't know, and the painted decoration, but absolutely everything. It's the sum of its parts. You're looking at as much of the building as you can to try and work out its sort of origin and its chronological development. So some of this stuff I've been doing with Andrea and Philip, it's just amazing, absolutely amazing. This Priory House Dunstable project I've been talking about, Andrea's looked at the paint schemes in there. She's got 3 different schemes of red, for instance. And in one room, we've got some painted decoration on some timber ceiling beams. And we know that we've got dendrochronology for those beams. So we know that the ceiling was built in the 1670s. So we know the paint was added after 1670s. So you start sort of building up this sort of chronological evidence for how people have been interacting with their environments, the choices that they're making and decorating it, which also gives us some sort of chronological evidence for the structure behind it. For example, some wallpaper, I've got some wallpaper in the 1790s. And I know the partitions are 18th century, but now I clearly know that they were there by 1790 because this wallpaper has been applied to them. And, it is the sum of its parts. It's all the evidence all brought down together to get you a sort of picture of this building and how it's evolved over time. And
how do you keep disciplined? Because
I
I wouldn't keep
yeah.
disciplined. I was walk in there and I would just be going from one thing to the next. I'd get so excited that if I'm there to do a particular job, sometimes this happens. I go there to do a particular job and then I just get carried away because I see a beautiful 17th century staircase and I look at that for an hour and I realize, that's not what I was here for.
Yeah, there's times that happens. I can't do it for very long. If they've paid me for one day, I've got one day. I can be as excited about that as I like, but I have to.
Yeah.
You have to sort of jog
Oh,
off.
it must be difficult, Maggie, though, because if you're like me, you're just so passionate about what you do, and then when you find something, and then you'll say to the client, "Do you know that's such and such?" And they go, "Really?" And then you can get into a conversation. It's very difficult, isn't it, not to just to say, "Oh, I'm not here for that." So let's just avoid talking about that. We need to concentrate on what we're doing.
That's so difficult, and I've had a lot of issues over the course of my career with not being able to get anything done because the person in front of me is standing in front of me. We're both in a cupboard. They're pointing at something in the cupboard. I can't see what they're pointing at because they're in front of me. It's just we go through the building together and they're consistently in front of me showing me stuff. It's just like, can't assess this, can't do the job. And I can't bring myself to say to people, and what I want to say to people is please go away and come back at 5 o'clock when I've done it and I've got something to tell you. We can both go around this, but we stop blinking and we're just mesmerised. We can both do it then, but not at the start. I need to assess it and bring all that information in so I've got something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get excited as well. Completely wrapped up in really specific things sometimes. It's like almost every month there's a new fascination. I have been completely hung up in hinges for years now.
Yeah, hinge of the day.
The day,
Everybody have a look at Maggie's hinge of the day. Is it on Instagram or
oh, it can be,
LinkedIn?
but it's really, really sporadic. So, and it was done, I did it for a laugh. It wasn't meant.
Yeah.
And I was sort of winding up a friend of mine who has another page that's very specific, fabric based. And I thought, I'll do this for a laugh. I'll have hinge of the day. And then now people are like, where's the hinge?
Yeah, where's the hinge of the day? Come on, Maggie, where is it?
Last night, how old is that hinge? So I've had to actually study hinges now so that I can answer people. So now I am obsessed. It started off as a joke, and now
Yeah.
I am. It's another sort of element. Buildings are fascinating things, absolutely fascinating things. And if you go around with any specialist, if I went round there with you, we'd be looking at the staircases and the floors and the panelling. If I went round there with Joe Thompson, I'd be looking at nail patterns and the joints.
Yeah.
If I went round with Andrea Kirkham, she'd be showing me the nail holes for the textiles and all the different wall paintings. So this is it. You can't do everything, and you're generally answering a brief. The client needs to know this much to be able to do that much, but it's sort of limitless, and nothing is ever done. So like if I go out and survey a building and I write a big report, that's just now. In 3 years' time, somebody might get the permission to take the roof off or to strip something, and that's a whole other interpretation, a whole other opportunity to refine the record, to add information. It's not static, and it never ends, and it's never been done. So when people say to me, why do you want to look at that? It's been done. No, it hasn't. And it'll never be done. We're never going to have all the information. But
No.
it's always worth revisiting and getting fresh perspectives on it.
Oh, the amount of things you see in descriptions and they're stating certain things and you look at it, you think, no, it's not right. The amount, it's incredible. And so, yeah, you're right. You never just look at something. If something's written in paper, oh, that's what it is. It's not. Let's have another look and revisit this.
Yeah, I sort of strive to get it as right as I can get it based on what I can see at the time. But it's open to interpretation. If there will be further opportunities to refine the record, and they should always be taken. It's never done.
Yeah.
But you get stories, don't you? You get people saying, "Oh, that mark there, that's where the brothers, the Roundheads, fought each other, and this is where the sword went into the banister on the staircase." Okay.
Do you think you were always interested in history when you were? Do you think that goes right the way back when you were a kid?
It must have done with that first book that I read when I was 4 on Scarab Bray, and then so I made a model of Scarab Bray. I made it out of plasticine, and I made every little tiny stone and built a little pot.
Oh yeah.
Then I got obsessed with Mott and Bailey's, so I got some papier mâché and I made the Mott, and I got all these little drinking straws and made little palisades and painted them all brown. And in all honesty, I'm wondering if I might have wanted to be an architect, but didn't realise it at the time because it was always framed in history. So yeah, I guess I've always had history. I've always studied history in the background, and I did when I was at school. I did technical drawing, and I did woodwork and metalwork. I did them right through to higher A levels, but I did all my exams. So I've been fascinated, particularly with woodwork, less so with metalwork, and how things are made.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because if you looked at behaviours and interests of children, there's a good chance that you can establish what they're going to end up doing. For instance, with me, I thought when I was sort of 12, 13, 14, 15, that I hated history at school. I was just so bored with history. I didn't enjoy it at all. And because I was sort of anti-establishment, I didn't enjoy history because it was school. I thought, well, that's it. That's just really boring. And plus I had a terrible teacher, by the way, boring Mr. Bolton at school. So I was convinced that I didn't like history. But You know what I used to do in my spare time? There was a field at the top of my garden, and it was, I think it used to be a Victorian dump, and now it was just agricultural fields. I used to grow cabbages. And when I was about 11 or 12, I used to go up there and find bits of pottery and clay pipes and things like that. And I had the interest to stick all of my findings in a scrapbook with some sellotape over the top. And I had about, 10, 20 pages of all this fragments of pottery. Nobody told me to go and do that. And in the meantime, I was at school hating history.
That's how it's taught. I'm sure that's how it's taught. Because
Yeah.
I remember in primary school, we had this fantastic teacher called Mrs. Drennan. She was amazing. And she taught us about the Romans. And it was just like, this is the most fascinating thing. I absolutely loved it. All the things they were telling us. They had sort of like, I won't go into it actually, because none of these are good stories. But yeah, this woman brought it all to life. But, and I went and I studied history for exams. I studied history, economic history, all that sort of stuff. And it truly depends on who taught it.
Yeah.
There's all these sort of gaps in my knowledge. There was one teacher, I don't even remember his name, and we were doing World War II campaigns. And it's just like, I can't remember any of it. I really don't know what he was teaching. And this is not because I wasn't interested in the subject, because I was, and other teachers at later dates brought it to life for me. So I think it's how it's taught. I don't think it's us not liking history.
No.
I'm pretty sure it's different nowadays. I'm absolutely certain it's different nowadays. They have the kids getting dressed up and bringing in artifacts.
Yeah, definitely. But if I look back then, I was absolutely destined to do what I do now.
Yeah, me too.
Because I would look at a piece of pottery and say, oh, is that Victorian, or is it older than that? Or a piece, I found a clay pipe once. It was a whole bowl, and it had, I think it was sort of French soldiers imprinted that were walking around with their muskets.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know where it's gone now, but I remember finding that, and it was the prize of my collection. But it's so strange because I ended up doing what I do, and this was almost my destiny without realizing.
It's a funny thing, because I think a bit about this, but I wanted to be an archaeologist. I always wanted to be an archaeologist, but the kind of working class background I had and the schools I went to, it's just thought, well, you can't do that. You can't do that. Why don't you do something else and have archaeology as a hobby? But luckily for me, I'm extremely stubborn. Don't tell me there's something I can't do, because then I will do it. It's how, it sort of went in my favor. Yeah, but in general, from where I grew up, they just sort of wanted to put you into normal careers. You make a good receptionist or something like that. Or but yeah, at the time I was doing all these things. I was doing technical drawing exams, and I was doing woodwork and metalwork exams, and I was doing art and maths and all English and geometry and trigonometry, all these things. It's just like wondering why I'm doing all that. I don't know why I'm doing all this. What am I going to use these things for? What am I going to use trigonometry for in the future? Do you know what? All of that is fed into what I do now. Absolutely everything. The arts, absolutely everything. You're sitting there using AutoCAD, learning how to use AutoCAD and trying to draw a Tudor arch. The geometry that goes into that, honestly, I thank my teachers for driving it into me when I was at school. And I'm glad I took these exams. So yeah, I think like you, there's sometimes it might seem a bit weird at the time. You're doing all these weird things, but sort of later in life, you think, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now if I hadn't done all those strange things then.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Tell me a little bit about impact assessments, and are they quite complicated? Are they quite controversial sometimes? Keeping all parties happy.
Oh, I don't keep all parties happy. I'm not interested in that at all.
I wasn't suggesting you were.
No,
I wondered if it's all sort of it can become a bit political and.
I talk about like a collaboration, and I talk about sort of getting people like me involved at the very early stage, understand what you've got, and then I should understand what people are trying to achieve. And they won't get what they want, but they'll get what they need. And I know that's a song, but you can sort of get the point. I've walked into houses where people have been in them 2 minutes, they've just bought them, and like, want this wall out, want that wall out, want, And then they'll say to you earnestly, I don't want to do anything bad to this. I just want to make it, I just want to do what's right for the building. And
I've heard that so
no,
many
you don't,
times.
Anna. It's like, no, you don't. You just want to do what's right for you. Right. What do you need? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to have a kitchen with a dining room. I need to be able to see where the kids are. And we need to have sort of level surfaces here, and there, because so-and-so has difficulty. Well, you get to the bare bones of what they actually need. And then you look at the building and you think, right, what can we achieve? And you don't need a big extension. Use your rooms better. Use what you've got better. And I do tell people to live in their buildings and don't start the scheme before you've completed your purchase. Live in the building, it'll change. Get to know your building. And when you get people like us involved and they'll tell you what's interesting about the building,
exactly.
9 times out of 10, people will change. I've seen schemes going from absolutely massive to virtually don't want to do anything, a modest extension in the back, because suddenly it's come alive for them, their building's come alive and they're lit up and they're trying to protect it. So they go from, I want to change everything to, we're just custodians, we're just looking after the building till the next generation. So it's be informed, get early advice. And there are plenty of people out there that will tell you what you want to hear. You can pay lots of money to all sorts of consultants that will tell you what you want to hear. And the local authority, it's just not going to wash. Sometimes you're 3 or 4 heritage statements until you get somebody that's looking at the actual building, telling you what is actually there and understanding the true impacts.
Yeah.
Early consultation, work with the local authorities, understand your buildings, live in them, and don't try and impose your will on them the minute you've moved in. And then you'll get your impact assessment will suddenly become so much smaller and so much easier, and you'll achieve what you need to achieve to live.
Yeah. That's probably one of the best tips I've heard. So for anybody listening to this podcast, it's so true. Buy your property and live in it. Live in it for a year, and also, as you say, just get the right team around to educate you about the building. And an old door that's on rusty T hinges with lots of saw marks all over it that you absolutely despise, you may fall in love with. When you realise it's hand sawn and it dates to 1650.
You get the torch out and you start looking at it, and it's nobody else has got one. You've got 5. It's just understand what you've got. It'll change your attitude.
It's so lovely when I've carried out some even virtual consultations, and the customer will be walking through their house that they've just bought, and I say, hey, hold on, stop. Let me have a look at that lovely hinge. And they pointed the camera to the hinge, and I said, that dates to about 1650, something along those lines. And I tell them about and they say, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even realize that when I bought the house. And it's little things like that you can enthuse and encourage people. So all of a sudden, as you say, that new kitchen's not going to go there. You're not going to put that new kitchen with that door. That's got to stay.
Some people are wed to it. That's that thing that goes back to what we were saying earlier about sometimes you have to do the work you don't want to do. And some people will not change their minds. They just won't do it. And it's difficult to find out why they're being so rigid. Is it coming from them, or is it coming from somebody else that's advising them? And there's nothing you can do. But I will be absolutely upfront. I can't, like recently I've been looking at something absolutely fantastic house around about 1700, almost intact. Got a lot of little close mullioned windows. It's a cracker. It's really good. But they want to sort of access the attics, and the attics were always integral to the building. So there's no reason not to access them. But where they want to put the staircase, and because it's a new staircase, it has to be compliant with building control. They're going to impact on the proportions of the first floor bedroom, like the original bedroom, the sort of best chamber, to be honest. So they want to impact on it. To do that, they're going to cut a corner out of the room. They're going to cut some joists at the ceiling. They're going to cut through the ceiling to access these 2 attics that are then going to need an awful lot of work to bring back into use. And I've actually forgotten why I'm talking about this. This is, so the owner's wed to it. You can't get me change his mind. So in my impact assessment, I have said pretty much what I have just said to you now. to do that, you're going to impact on the proportions of the room, the fabric of the ceiling structure, all that sort of stuff. And then I said, I strongly recommend that this is omitted from your proposal scheme. And I submitted that to them because that's what I think. And I'm not going to say it's no harmful because it is. And, you know, my reputation is at stake. I'm not going to start telling people what they want to hear, you know.
No.
If they can pay somebody else to tell them what they want to hear, they'll still not get that staircase. They're never going to get that staircase. So better to be honest.
And when does an impact assessment come in? Does it come in when they've put the like a pre-application in? They put a pre-application and say, right now we want to do X, Y, and Z, and we want to remove that staircase and put it there. Do they then have to have an impact assessment? So somebody like you will come along and say, right, let's have a look at this, and this is what you can and what you can't do. Is that the stage that comes in at?
Could come in at any stage. They can start. You can start with a wish list. You know, people don't even need to have a finished scheme. In fact, I've just written an impact assessment for my own house. I don't have a scheme. You know, I don't have an architect design scheme as yet. I just have a list of things that we want to achieve here, having lived here for a while. You know, that we want to achieve. So I've prepared an impact assessment which we will submit for pre-application purposes, so that we can speak to the conservation officer and discuss the potential. So you can do it right here, right early stage, or you can wait until you work through the process. Quite often with my clients, we'll start with either a scheme or a wish list, and then we'll be armed with the knowledge of the building, which is what I bring to it, and then we'll discuss. There'll be a lot of back and forth between me and the owners, me and the architects, all of us together, as we sort of refine the scheme to make it of minimal impact or beneficial or both to the special character and significance of the property. And then we either take it to pre-app, especially sometimes you can completely bypass pre-app if you've got a good strong scheme and you feel ready. But if you've got a couple of things that you're just not sure about, and I can't give you a steer on because they're tricky things, get the local authority out, armed with all the knowledge that we're already armed with. They've seen my report or an interim statement. They've got a sketch design or a design or whatever from the owners and their agents. Get the local authority out, and then we can talk about the whole building, get everybody really excited about it, which is generally what we do, or what I do. You know, everybody's like absolutely up for what can we do to manage change in this building. And then we look at the tricky things and try and find a way forward. And sometimes there's no way forward, like that staircase. You're not going to get it. There's no way forward with that. You might be able to look at other places to put the staircase and other ways to use the attics. That would be the way forward. You know, and sometimes the local authority will get really involved in this and start suggesting things. You know, they won't design it for you because they can't do that, but they'll start saying, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And then you just sort of get even more of a sort of exciting collaborative approach. Because when you think about it, at the end of the day, the conservation officers, they have this responsibility, and this is their legacy. Every decision they make about the historic buildings is down to them. This is their legacy. They're leaving that behind. We're all responsible, so we should all be working together to get the best possible outcome. So yeah, and answer your question, you can start your impact assessment at the start, almost like a risk assessment. You can just use it to rework and rework and rework until you get to your final scheme, or you can iron out all your problems and put your impact assessment in with your heritage statement at the end, and then it's almost making decisions for people. Because there is no harm here and no harm here.
Do they have to get somebody as qualified as you to do the impact assessment? Who's qualified? Who could do an impact assessment?
Anybody. The owner, their pal.
Really?
Person in the street, your dog. Yep, anybody can write a heritage statement and an impact assessment. It doesn't mean you're going to get what you set out to achieve, but anybody can do one. Some local authorities will say a suitably qualified individual. And I am a suitably qualified individual, but there are an awful lot of people out there that think they're suitably qualified individuals. And maybe they are, you know, so anybody can write any of these things.
But there doesn't seem to be a lot of point, because it's going to end up in front of the lap of somebody who knows what they're talking about and just going to say no anyway, if somebody unqualified writes it.
Yeah, I have a few and have had a few projects where I am the third or fourth version of a heritage statement because the other two or three have failed. So it's good to get good advice and a good team right at the start. You have to be careful who's writing your statement, and it's good if you've got somebody that's objective. That would be my big recommendation. Get somebody objective, because everybody else is invested in it. The owner wants to make the changes. Whoever's going to carry out that construction wants that job. So, you know, you can have a lot of people saying there will be no harm because that's what they want to achieve. So you need somebody objective. In my opinion, there are people that get very far with other types of specialists and consultants and suitably qualified individuals.
So that leads me on to my next question, really. Then the difference between an impact assessment and a heritage statement. We've just discovered that anybody can write an impact assessment, which is news to me. I didn't realize that. But not, please don't tell me that anybody can write a heritage statement.
Yep, I can send you if you like. Anybody. It can be a half a page, can like literally be a paragraph. Some people just put in the listed building thing of the you know, English Heritage website. It's like my building is 16th century. Then they'll explain what they want to achieve, and then they'll say there's no harm in, you know, demolishing the 17th century wing or whatever. So anybody can write any of these.
And why wouldn't those two be one document?
Can be one document. All mines are one document. All my heritage.
They are. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. You can. People can ask me specifically for a heritage statement, especially if I can't assess the impacts of the changes they want to make, because I think they're harmful. I can say, you can submit my heritage statement and I will remove my impact assessment, and you can assess the impact yourself, or your agent can do it. Because I won't, if there's harm, there's harm, and I'm not going to put my name to it. So a heritage statement can stand alone, but for the majority of my work, like the vast majority of my work, the heritage statement and the impact assessment is a single document, and they all include an interpretive survey of the buildings. There's never.
Yes, I was going to say, what's in a heritage statement typically?
Anything you like. It can seriously be one page, depending on who do it. In my heritage statements, you will have an origin and development of your building. You'll have a chronological understanding of your property, and you will have a statement of significance that will tell you what's significant about that. We will have phased plans, and these, you will be able to look at these plans and see at a glance where the very early fabric is, where the very late fabric is, where things may be more conducive to change, where they're far more sensitive. And then you'll have your impact assessment. And by the time we get the impact assessment, we've generally ironed out everything. So we can clearly demonstrate that there will be no harm. You know, and sometimes that's subjective. You know, I will look at it and I'll think there's no harm, but the local authority will go, no, you can't do, they'll still say you can't do that for whatever reason, because they've got a different understanding. They're looking at all their properties and their area as a whole, and they may have a different meaning on various things.
I see. So once this document's been produced, where does it then go, Maggie?
It gets submitted with a planning application. So it's a supporting document, you know, goes in there with everything else, their design and access statements, all their plans, all that sort of stuff, and goes into public domain. So anybody can access examples of my work. I mean, examples of my work everywhere anyway, but they can be as complex and detailed or as brief as you want them to be. I like to provide enough information. My plan when I set out to do this is to inform the owner and inform the local authority so that they can all make better decisions. They know what they've got in front of them. So even if I'm writing an impact assessment or I'm not, they're going to be able to look at the building and see what the building is, and then work it between them what they can achieve. So yeah, in some instances I don't have impact assessments, you know, aren't part of my reports because they don't need to be. The stage that some people get me involved in is just to provide the background information, and they'll take it from there. Okay.
And then who looks at the heritage statement? What qualifications does that individual have? Or an impact assessment?
That's going to vary. It's going to be the conservation officer that's looking at it, and probably the case officer, which will be the planning person for various local authorities. They'll look at it and they'll assess the scheme. That's one of the sort of contributing documents. They look at everything. They look at, you know, you're going to get letters from locals. You're going to comment on your scheme. You're going to get, sorry, everything's gone a bit mad in here. Phone's ringing, the cat's meowing.
That's okay.
Yeah, I've lost track there.
So that listed building, the conservation officer,
Yeah.
what type of qualifications would they have to be qualified to be able to look at the heritage statement and say, right, okay, I think this, I think that?
I would imagine that they have various background qualifications. The people I work with most, I do a lot of work with like Wealdon District Council, Mid Sussex District Council. They're probably the two main local authorities that I work with, and they're fantastic, absolutely fantastic. The team in there are great. They know their buildings, they know their area. You can have incredible conversations. You get them out and you start talking about the building. They know what you're talking about. I know what they're talking about. You get really good discussions, and we're all working. That's that thing. It's their legacy. We're all working towards getting the best possible result. So, like conservation officers are not something to be scared of. They're people to bring in and think of as part of your collaborative approach, as part of your team. And, you know, they're there, get the best out of them.
And then obviously some are better than others and more qualified than others as well.
Absolutely. Some buildings archaeologists are better than others. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It will vary. Some people are a wee bit more early career, but, you know, we were all early career. It's just working with people, informing folk, you know, not telling people and sort of laying down the law. It's sort of making it a sort of iterative process. Yeah, they will vary. There's a lot of people. We lose a lot of really well qualified people to the like private companies, you know, because working in a local authority is a thankless task. They are short-staffed. They have people angry at them all the time. Everybody just wants to do what they want to do, and these people are at the front end of all that. So, in all honesty, I don't envy them their job. And if you work with them, you can bring out the best in them. They have something. They have a lot to offer. I just think people, they get a really bad sort of deal, a bad sort of reputation, and it isn't necessarily like that.
Yeah.
And they all come from different backgrounds. You get people with more of a planning background, people more with a sort of Institute of Historic Building Conservation qualification type background. So very varied.
But it makes their job easier if they have somebody like you or me on board, because they then get that reassurance that, okay, Maggie's producing this heritage statement and, you know, very, very well respected, knows what she's talking about. And it just cuts out a lot of the worry and fear for them, because, as you say, they're responsible and they don't want to be, you know, putting a seal of approval on something if it's going to come back and bite them. So that's the thing, isn't it? I think a lot of the time they don't have the support and they don't have enough of professional guidance around them. We don't work as a team enough to.
I think about it as a team.
Yeah.
If you bring in the people that you need, and every job's different. You know, I've had you on board for projects. I've had Ed Morton and Sarah Tattersall, Andrew Holloway, Tim Floyd. You know, bring various people into various projects where their expertise is required, because you will iron out issues. So by the time you get to getting your consent, you're getting your consent. You know, you've started that process. You're talking to the local authorities. There's going to be hiccups along the way. You know, there's going to be things where you'll have to go back and do something and step away, or some people are going to have to delve in and do something, then step away, and then we will get to something and achieve what it is we've set out to do, or achieve what you need, rather than necessarily everything that you wanted in the first instance, you know, before you considered your property. So I think people should think of them more as part of the team. They have knowledge. They also have like that knowledge that I definitely don't. They know what their policy is. They know what's going to be acceptable and what isn't.
Yeah.
And so like, they're not against you. It's not us against the local authority and the planning system. We're all in this together, and we can find ways forward together.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Better information, better sort of discussions, you know, collaboration. I love collaboration.
Yeah.
And all these other people that have specialist knowledge. No, it's my thirst for knowledge. I want to know what they know. So bring them all in, pick the brains,
Yeah.
get good result.
Yeah, no, I agree, completely agree. I just want to before we go on to the next subject, I just want to ask you a little bit about historic building records, because I looked at your website and just saw that I think there were 4 stages or 4 types of historic building record. Or what? Could you just tell us a little bit more
Really out of
about
date.
historic buildings records?
Yeah, my website's really out of date, and it's actually it's being rebuilt by a sort of friend of mine, and she's done an incredible job. But we can't sort of release it into the wild yet because she's desperately waiting for me to give her a wee bit more content on sort of timelines for historic buildings I've worked on. So the site I've got there is just a holding page basically. But if you're talking about the Historic England levels 1 to 4,
That's it. That's what I was talking about. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's different. This differs in different areas. So when I worked in Oxfordshire, there was a lot of level whatever surveys for predetermination. So, for instance, I worked on a former workhouse in Tame, Oxfordshire. So at the time it was in use as a college, I think, and they were going to turn it into flats. And the local authority wanted a level 2/3, something like that, survey of the building so that they get a really clear understanding and drawn and photographic and documentary record of this building as it was before they made any changes to it, to help inform them of the changes. So that was in Oxfordshire, and that's gone back, like 18 years, something like that. So down in the southeast, there's less building recording to level whatever. It's more to do with interpretive surveys and heritage statements and things like that. Historic building assessments. So when the levels 1 to 4 kick in, it's more to do with you've already got your planning consents and your listed building consents. You're already making changes, and there's a condition there to record the building before and during it's changed, because it will never be the same again. So it differs in local authorities, various local authorities, basically. And in all cases, you're basically still trying to understand the origin, development, and significance of these buildings, and there's just different ways to do it. So you can have a photographic survey, which will create that record, which will be archived so that it's in there for posterity, which is the difference, I think, between building records and things like heritage statements. We're under sort of no obligation to archive our work, whereas if there's a condition attached to it and it's gone through planning and they've asked for building records of various types, then it has to be archived for posterity, which is a very positive thing.
Oh, good. Well,
or very few things.
Oh, good. Thanks for describing that. So what would be one of your most memorable projects, or any unique challenge it posed, and what the outcome was? I'm putting you on the spot here, but you must have a few sort of favorite projects, and it might be the one that you're looking at now with the 13th century vault.
Oh yeah, I love that. This has been amazing. The Crown House is amazing. It is in quite a bad state. Part of the reason it's in quite a bad state is because it's been here since the 1200s, and it has gone through a huge amount of change, particularly in the Georgian period, where they really chopped it up. And part of it is because of intervention that's happened in more recent years, like 2004, for example, where really, really bad repairs were undertaken that have now had a knock-on effect that are causing harm to the building, which we are now trying to rectify, which has given us an incredible opportunity to see the bare bones of this building. So I'm seeing behind the panelling's come off so that we can, so that repairs to the masonry can be carried out. Yeah, that is a remarkable building, and the sort of organic matter of the vaults, the opportunity to excavate that has been fantastic. And like I said, the wall paintings and the wallpaper, Andrea Kirkham and Philip Aitken, is amazing. Especially Philip wrote this lovely little report on the wallpapers in these first floor rooms, and the way he describes it, it's nothing like the kind of thing I do. It's just you're just traveling with him. You're going up this early 18th century oak carved staircase, and you're going into the salon, and the light shining through the sort of sash window with its arched heads, and it's picking up the wallpaper with its the green bands. He puts people in rooms.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a lovely thing. I forget sometimes about the people. I'm more caught up in how the building was built and how it's changed. And I like, for that, you look at craftsmen and you can get quite involved in who did the work, but I never think about the choices made in decoration or the people or how they're, that sort of thing. So that's added extra colour. That was a good project. That I hope, it feels like it's a never-ending project, but fingers crossed it's all going to be good in the next year. Go on.
No, I was going to say, it always amazes me when you go back through some of the early layers, how dark these houses were. I mean, they loved chocolate brown and sort of arsenic green. And I mean, these houses would have been so dark. I wonder why they chose some of those colors.
I don't know. It's fashions, isn't it? I really
Yeah.
don't know. It's different houses and different sort of status and stuff. I can't remember the name of the person's house, but there's this little house in Cambridge. It's a little terraced house, so sort of 19th century, and it has been listed in fairly recent years and open to the public. And the person that lived in it was a sort of decorator, and he worked on a whole load of big projects and famous buildings and painted decoration. But what he's done in this little terrace house, what he did in the 19th century, is he's decorated every inch of this house, all of it. It's like an assault on your senses when you go in there. It's quite small, and you can't get far enough back, and everything's painted. There's borders, the walls are painted. It looks like wallpaper. It's all hand painted. The floors are painted, everything. And it's like a truly remarkable thing. And it feels quite dark because it's all brown, but it wasn't brown. It was white. It's the varnish. So, some of the times the things that we think are really dark weren't really dark at all. So there's an element of that. And then obviously there's an element of fashion. There's lots of greens, definitely. But I think somebody did a paint analysis of a Georgian, quite a fancy sort of Georgian manor, and the owners wanted a paint analysis, but they basically wanted a colour, And when it came back and it was all the greens and browns, they wouldn't reinstate any of it because they didn't.
As a surprise.
They weren't getting a French grey,
Yeah. That's funny. Have you ever, or your colleagues, found some sort of interesting artifacts when you've been poking around up in roof voids and bricks and fireplaces? And go on, what have you found?
Oh, the usual things, the shoes, lots of shoes. I think you saw a picture of one of the properties that I looked at. There's a whole collection of shoes and the void.
Did you find that?
Yeah.
Did you?
I did. It was.
Oh my God.
I know it was not meant to get out into the public domain. I sent it to a friend who was interested in it, and she shared it with a group that were specifically interested in leather artifacts, and from there somebody shared it, the way these
it went,
this is why I didn't have permission to put that picture out in the first place. So I know. So be cautious. But anyway, that whole collection of shoes had gone in. There was a smoke bay in a 16th century building, and then they inserted a chimney stack into that smoke bay, and there was a void, and in this void was just a whole host of shoes, children's shoes, adult shoes, everything. So there's that. And I have a little shoe here, actually, that's come from a building in Sussex. And the reason that I have it is because the building is like under reconstruction. So when they get to a point where I can take it back and they can put it back where they got it, it's staying here with me to sort of, protect it.
Wow, amazing.
Very
and
nice.
did the group of sort of shoes that you found, were they all the similar date?
I don't actually know because we never got them looked at by anybody. It was a very strange project. I'm not going to go into how strange a project it was, but there was never really any remit for me to be there recording it in the first place. So, the fact that we know anything about that's
But you were the first person to see those shoes since probably the 1700s or something like that.
Oh, I think 19th century, to be honest. I don't think they were that
Oh,
early.
were they?
Yeah.
They still did that in the 19th century. They still put the shoe, and I still don't know what the reason was behind shoes in particular.
I don't think anybody does. This is like, our taper burns and there are portrait marks and all this with the
Yeah.
series, but we don't really know. But it's quite nice not knowing, I think. But yeah.
Yeah. It's God, that's fascinating. And so you found some shoes. What
Oh,
have you ever found these sort of, I don't know, clay pipes or
clay
coins
pipe,
or?
yeah. Yep, we've got a whole host of clay pipes. We've had coins. Got a coin recently that's late 18th century, one of those big, I don't know what they are, big coins. And that was in, where was that? This was in a building in Winchester Cathedral Close, an absolutely phenomenal building, part masonry, part timber framed, incredible thing. And it sort of lifted up the floors, and we'd gone in and to record the sort of structure under the floors. But as part of that, they were hoovering out the floor voids. So when they hoovered out the floor voids by room, by area and room, now it's fine. They all got bagged, and then we sieved everything. So it was quite useful. Quite a lot of the rooms have nothing. There's just nothing to report in them. And then in other rooms, we found tiny little spinning tops that were made with made by.
Oh,
It turns out it was a schoolroom, and there was all these tiny little spinning tops, and there was some paper with handwriting on where they were practicing the handwriting with the words over and over again, things like that. So we managed to identify the schoolroom. We knew there was one because we knew the building had been used in that.
oh, how amazing.
Yeah, so we know what rooms that is. But the coin we found wedged between a ceiling joist and a bearer. And it was definitely placed. It's a placed object. Whoever the builders were, they placed that coin in to sort of date that intervention, that period of work. So that was cool. The other one is we got a really big clay pipe recently. It's in two parts, but they joined together. And this is in Priory House in Dunstable. And it was between two different fireplaces. So there's a sort of 17th century fireplace. Then there's another 17th century insert. Then there was a later insert. Then it was blocked. And this pipe is between two of those, so it's quite securely dated. That was good.
Oh,
I think what else? I don't know. Stuff comes up all the time. Can't think. We did got a witch bottle in Oxfordshire, and then in a chimney. Oh, I found in Sussex a Neolithic tree felling axe, which is big sort of polished axe. Absolutely amazing. Almost stopped my heart because I'd always wanted to find one of those when I was
God.
not in. It wasn't in situ. So this is an example, like I was saying earlier, about things that are older not being in their sort of primary deposits. So what had happened is somebody had placed it under the floor as a sort of placed object, as a sort of protection against any damage to the building. I think they call them thunderbolts. So they placed it in to prevent the building, suffering damage through fire and things like that. Yeah, things come up all the time.
Oh.
But never, not many things are quite as exciting as the tree felling axe.
That's incredible. Was it quite big as well? Probably.
Maybe about like 7 inches or something like that. Yeah, it was
Was
quite
it?
fun. Yeah. Oh, I
Oh.
found a lot of desiccated rats in my time, and apparently they're placed objects. So I remain unconvinced. So,
Yeah, I found many mice and rats underneath floorboards.
yeah. Well, I found one that had been placed on top of a crown post, on top of the sort of collar purlin. So somebody had put it there because it was lying like that. It's this dead rat. But I don't know if they just found the dead rat and stuck it somewhere out of the way. So rather than placed it there specifically to protect the building from rats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. So coming towards the end now, Maggie, and what would you say is just the most rewarding aspect of your work?
Oh, well, protecting the buildings, I suppose, and changing people's attitude to them when you
Yeah.
come look at
Yeah.
it. They're like, I want this. I want a glazed link. Everybody wants a glazed link. I want this, that, the next thing. And you're just like, you have this. And through that process, they're like, I don't even want an extension. That sort of thing. People
Yes.
engaging the owners and the occupants with their building, that's very rewarding there. But knowing that you've helped sort of preserve what's important about a building for the future, that's also very good. And I've worked on some enforcement cases and things like that, so I have to say, it's no bad thing punishing people for really bad things, for causing irreparable damage to rare buildings and structures. So I don't know, it's all the word and I love it. It's just a really interesting and generally very rewarding experience. You learn more, I learn more. Everybody's more informed. We get to appreciate people that built these things and the craftsmanship that goes into these things and the people that commissioned them, and personal choices that people make and how they lay out their building, how they use their buildings, how that changes over time. It's all the word, and I love it all.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? And you just never stop learning.
No.
I come back from a project sometimes, I think, oh my God, I don't know enough. I just do not know enough. I got to learn more. But then there's not the time to be having your head stuck in a book all the time. You've got to be out working. So it's quite difficult, isn't it? But
one of the things that David Martin said to me, because I'm always in touch with him saying, oh, what is this? What, I've never seen this. What is that? And he said that the more you know you don't know. And I think that's the absolute truth about this. So like, no matter the experience you've got, no matter the background that you've got, you're just, all you're going to do is realize how much you don't know.
Yeah.
That's the whole collaborative thing as far. They'll get everybody else in to tell you other things and build up the story.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, for any youngsters out there that are listening to this thinking that's what I want to do, what would be your advice? So if you seem to have a really good path into your industry, and obviously you worked really hard and you stayed out in the field longer than anybody else, and that's the reason why you are where you are. But let's say a 17-year-old Maggie, what would you advise that individual to do to get into buildings archaeology?
I think if you wanted to go down an academic route, there are great places to do that. And I've mentioned York. They've always been excellent with historic buildings. And also there's the Wheels Endowment, but that's sort of MSc, so that's a bit later in life. You can get into historic buildings from any career, really. You can do it through history, you can do it through archaeology, you can do it woodwork, through carpentry, through furniture, through painting, decorating, through plastering. You can come at it from any direction. Find something, an element of the buildings that you are specifically interested in, and pursue that. Join all the local societies, join all the groups, talk to the people that have already got the experience, go on to all the training days and tester days, and just to immerse yourself in it, get to know folk. People want to help you, people want to share knowledge. And as I'm sort of in the middle of my career, and the people that have helped me or later in their career, we want to pass this stuff on. I want the next generation to be coming up. So, talk to us. We'll point you in the right direction, get you in touch with groups in your local area. But immerse yourself in it, find the specific area that you're interested in, and then don't give up.
Do you think there's the same amount of interest now with youngsters today as there would have been 20 years ago, or are they slightly different?
To be honest, I don't know. I don't have a lot of communication with young folk, to be fair, and in my work. So I think everything's different. Looking at it from like my great age, looking back, the world that they're in is very different to the one I came up in, and the sort of technology and everything that's available to them wasn't available to us. So I'm not the right person to ask for that, for sure. I think there's a lot more information out there now that you can get at than I could because of the internet and things like that.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah. I mean, exactly. What you can find now on the internet. I mean, it's incredible. But I just think it's hard for me to understand how anybody could not be interested in what you do and what I do. I can't get my head around that. That, you know, if I was a 17-year-old, I would have worked much harder, Maggie, much harder. I didn't realize that time went along quite quickly. I didn't realize.
You know that when you get older, don't you? And you look back,
I know. When I started digging up my clay pipes when I was 11 or 12, I said, I'm going to be an archaeologist. But unfortunately, I didn't go to the right school to become an archaeologist and get the right qualifications. I find that this whole world of historic buildings and what you do, what I do, I just think it's incredible. And it would be great to have more youngsters involved. And, you know, if anybody is listening to this podcast, then, you know, just get in touch, because we'll always point you in the right direction of what to do.
I think other people in your local area, because they're there. If you've got historic buildings, then you'll have groups in your local area that know all about these buildings and will encourage you, and they will definitely encourage you. And that's sometimes better than, or as good as, looking online. There's a lot of rubbish online. Everybody knows that. You know, it's quite hard. When I first started using the internet as a research tool, there was so much less on it, and it was so much easier to get things you needed. Now you have to filter through all the stuff they're trying to sell you, where you can get to specific information. So it's just, you know, yeah, get in touch and we'll help put you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that would be great. I would love to just spend a day with you on site and just going through what you do and how you do it. I would obviously it has to be a client approval, and that's not always that easy, but it would just be wonderful, because then we could do, you know, a bit about your industry, then we could swap over a bit about mine, and we could just go around an interesting house and just film that. That would be great.
We could do that, because it's quite good to get you in. There's some doors I want you to look at. There's some stairs I want you to look at. Yeah.
Oh,
there's
okay.
Haunted rooms that neither of us can look at. Yeah, I've got a few in mind if you'd actually want to do that. I've got one in mind where the owners would be well up for that. I think it's in a bit of a state, but there's a lot of
they're the best. They're the best.
Well, beautiful carved staircase that, you know, went like early 17th century, I think, with those overwhelmingly ornate finials and sort of carved door surrounds and chamfer stops and things like that. I think you'd like it.
Oh, I'd love that. Right, definitely, we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us today, sharing your wealth and your knowledge and experience. And I've absolutely loved it, as I knew I would, talking to you about your incredible work. But before we go, where can our listeners find out more about your work and projects? I know you mentioned that your website's going to be up in the near future, but
it's still up there, and you can contact me directly. There's still a contact page on it, and I will respond. The website will be revamped. I mean, it's in the process, so it will get better. The information is better. You can get a hold of quite a lot of my National Trust reports through the National Trust archive. So I think it's the NTSMR online.
wow.
And
fantastic.
I am on various social media, but I'm not madly active, so I'm a bit sporadic. But I will put out photographs on Blue Sky and various things like that, and tell you a bit about what I'm looking at.
Brilliant. We'll include those links in the show notes. So thanks ever so much again for your time, Maggie. It's just been wonderful talking to you, and we will catch up soon on site, hopefully.
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks very much. It's been fun.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yes.